What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today for the final preview for the Stanley Cup playoffs for this year. We have the Stanley Cup final preview. We have the Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Florida Panthers in the 2023 Stanley Cup final. Nearly said Western Conference final. That is not true. Florida is not in the West. I'm wearing the team who I want to win. Not who I think is going to win. Maybe, maybe not. We'll go through that. But who I want to win is, of course, the Vegas Golden Knights. Wearing my Marc-Andre Fleury white jersey. Although he's no longer on the team, he is definitely the most winning of this ever player who has ever been on the Knights. He's won 3 cups and Vezina, and yeah. So let's look at these teams because they came from very different sides of the spectrum. But let's get with some history. So Vegas makes the Stanley Cup final in their first year back in 2017-18. They play the Washington Capitals. They win Game 1, but then lose the next 4 with Ovechkin in the game getting it together. They lose that series in 5, and their greatest expansion team of all time comes to an end in the final. And it was a great story, and we all thought they'd be back because when you think when a team is going to finish 7th or 8th in the division, and they ended up finishing 1st in the division, so I think 3rd in the West that year. They go all the way to the final, and then 2019 happens. They lose in the first round, very controversially. It's still one of the worst penalties I've ever seen and called. Then you have 2020. They go to the conference final. They lose to Dallas in 5. 2021, they choke against Montreal in 6. 2022, they're injured to hell and back, and they don't even make the playoffs, with the Chicago ironically eliminating them. And then this year, they're back, number 1 in the Western Conference, number 1 in the Pacific Division. And to get here, they played Winnipeg, who they beat in 5. They played Edmonton, who they beat in 6, and they played Dallas, who after having going up 3-0, they had a little scare, but they end up finishing them in 6 games. For Florida, complete opposite side of the spectrum. In their 29-ish year existence, they made the Stanley Cup final in their 3rd season in the league. They went up against the Colorado Avalanche back in 1996, and they were swept. Not only were they swept, but it was kind of a destructive sweep. Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Patrick Waugh, you name them, a whole bunch of players that are in the Hall of Fame. You kind of destroyed them. There was a 3-1, there was an 8-1, a triple overtime Game 4 that ended up being 1-0 with Yui Krupp getting the winner. And so Florida, not even a favorite this year. After winning the President's Trophy last year, they were hardly in the playoffs for the majority of the season, fighting the last weeks, the last days of the season to get a spot. They end up in the second wild card, which they needed Chicago to help get because Chicago ended up beating Pittsburgh, which ended up being the final straw, as they and Columbus eliminated Pittsburgh while Florida gets in, much to my delight. So for Florida to get here, they beat the greatest regular season team in NHL history, the 2022-23 Boston Bruins, 65 wins, 135 points, was it? They go down 3-1 against them, and then after that, Game 5 where Ullmark gives up the puck behind the net to Tkachuk. That win in Game 5, they've only lost 1 game since then. They win the next 3, including 2 of those in overtime, Game 5 and Game 7. 7-5 win against Boston in Game 6 at home. They eliminate them, humiliate them. Then they go against Toronto, who wins their first series in 19 years. They go up 3-0. Toronto gets Game 4, but they end up getting Game 5 in overtime. And then for Carolina, they make sure they still have not won a conference final game since 2006, as they sweep them. 3rd time in the conference final. Carolina's been swept since their cup win. They are 0-12 in their last 12 Stanley Cup final games, Western Conference final, or Eastern Conference final games. And for Florida, they have won 11 out of their last 12 games. They are on fire and have the momentum. They've also had more rest than Vegas, so we'll see if that has any effect early on in this series. Meetings between these teams met twice since they're in opposite conferences. On January 12th, 2023 in Florida, Vegas wins that one 4-2 on the road. And then on March 7th, 2023 in Vegas, Florida wins that one on the road 2-1. So both teams have beat each other's in their opponent's building. Factors for Vegas, I think it's going to be defense and depth. Their depth, I'd say, is much better than Florida's. Honestly, I could say looking at Florida's depth, this might be one of the worst Stanley Cup final teams I've ever seen on paper. But whatever they've done, they've been able to get it done. They've been able to limit their chances. Bobrovsky's been incredible, which leads into Florida's factors, goaltending, and the underdog story. They're a 17th seed. They're not even the top half of the league, and they made it here. And this is kind of what we expected from them last year, and after bowing out, they came back this year. They fired their coach. Well, they didn't fire Andrew Brunette. They kind of just let him go. And then Paul Maurice gets hired, questioning move at the time, and look, he's all the way back here. For Bruce Cassidy in Vegas, it's his first year in Vegas after being fired by Boston. He's here. And same with Paul Maurice after being resigning from the Winnipeg Jets head coaching position. 1 year later, he's in the Stanley Cup final with Florida. So, very interesting storylines for both teams here. Both teams have a potent offense, that's no question. When you got all these names, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart, Bennett, Montour, Duclair, all those names for Florida. On from Vegas side, you have Eichel, Marchessault, Stone, Barbashev, Carlson, Stevenson, Smith. All those guys known to produce offense. It's going to be a very interesting series. These teams are built somewhat similarly, but not really. I'd say Vegas has the much better depth and can play. They both play a very physical style. We'll see how this goes. For Vegas, they have 6 original members from that 2018 team here. I can't speak today. So you have Marchessault, you have Carlson, you have Smith. So those 3 there, and then you have Braden McNabb, Shea Theodore, and of course, I'm not on the board here, but William Carrier, a bottom 6 guy. He's been here since the start. And if you want to count Zach Whitecloud, he played 1 game in the regular season in 2017-18. He did not play in the playoffs, but he was also here on that expansion team. Let's look at the point totals for both of these teams. We'll start with Vegas. Jack Eichel in his first playoff performance, first playoff run, first ever playoffs, after being away from Buffalo. 6 goals, 12 assists, 18 points. If Vegas has a front runner for the Conn Smythe, I would say he is probably it right now. Marchessault has 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points. My guy. Mark Stone, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. Ivan Barbashev, fantastic pickup. I've said it before. 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. I'd love if Vegas kept him around next year. William Karlsson, another one of my guys. 10 goals, 4 assists, 14 points. He leads the playoffs in goals, I believe. Stevenson, 8 goals, 6 assists, 14 points. Riley Smith, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points. Flying a bit under the radar this playoffs. Pietrangelo, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. And Nick Waugh, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. Aiden Hill is 7-3 with a .937 save percentage. He's been fantastic. 2 shutouts against Dallas with a 2.07 goals against average. Brazois, before getting injured, was 5-2 with an .894 save percentage, 3.18 goals against average. For Florida, Tkachuk leads second in the playoffs in points, only behind Roope Hintz, who's now been eliminated. He leads the playoffs in active players in points. 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points for Matthew Tkachuk. What a pickup out of Florida. What a trade can we just talk about for a second. The risk of sending Huberdeau and Weegar, 2 very prominent players from their President's Trophy winning team, over to Calgary, along with a prospect and a first-round pick for this guy. He's been all that's been advertised. You could say Florida, to this point, has won the trade, in which they, at this point, last year at this point, I would say they greatly lost. For Verhaeghe, 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. Barkov, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. Had a bit of a bounce-back round last round. Reinhart, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points. Sam Bennett kept embracing the villain role in this playoffs. 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. Brandon Montour has cooled off from the first round, but still prominent. 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points. Anthony Duclair, after coming back from injury during the second round, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points. Bobrovsky's the story here. 11-2, .935 save percentage, 2.21 goals against. At this point, if the Conn Smythe is awarded, I think if in Florida wins, I think Bobrovsky probably gets it, should be solidifying his spot in the Hall of Fame. However, Tim Thomas also has the same exact accolades if that happens. Tim Thomas and Bobrovsky, I see, as very similar goaltenders right now. Both have 2 Vezinas. If Florida wins and Bobrovsky wins the Conn Smythe, they both have a Stanley Cup and a Conn Smythe. Tim Thomas is not in the Hall of Fame. He did not play in the NHL for very long. We'll see if Bobrovsky eventually gets in at this point, if that does happen. Alex Lyon, 1-2 with a .902 save percentage before being replaced by Bobrovsky, 3.26 save percentage, or 3.26 goals against. Bobrovsky is living up to that $10 million contract that was assigned 4 years ago now. This is the best he's played in Florida, and if he keeps this going, that contract next year is even going to look even better if he keeps this up in the regular season next year. Now, last thing I want to talk about, who do I think is going to win the series? I think it's going to not be a long series. Both of these teams have kind of run on momentum, Florida especially. Both of these teams have had their streaks. Florida's won 11 out of their last 12, and Vegas, besides giving up 2 games to Dallas, they had won at that point 5 in a row. 5 in a row at that point, and even before that, they've had 2 5-game winning streaks in this playoffs. Florida, of course, they've had their streak, and momentum is going to be key. I think whoever wins Game 1 has a very good chance of ending the series in 5 or 6 games. If this goes 7, I'll honestly be surprised. And at this point, who do I think is going to win? It's hard to say. I could see both of these teams walking away. Florida with the momentum, of course, Vegas with their more experience. They've been here before, that kind of thing. I think the Florida Panthers are going to win the 2022-23 Stanley Cup. I'm going to be honest here. I think Vegas might very well could win it. They could run away with it. But the way Florida has been playing this all-around game, physical, offensive, defensive, goaltending amazing, everything has gone right to this point, and I don't see why it should not keep going right. For Vegas, Florida's also had more rest. For Vegas, they've had less rest. Maybe that helps them because sometimes it takes a while to get back into the game of going in, go get them. And so either of these teams could win. I hope to see a great series. Two teams I'd like to see in the final. 2 teams I really could care less. If I wasn't a Vegas fan, let's say this was like, what's another Western team I like at this point? Let me look at the magnets. Let's say it was Arizona in the final. Let's say it was Arizona versus Florida in the final. I wouldn't not care who won this final. But Vegas, they're my second favorite team. I'm going to be rooting for them. Thus, I'm wearing my Vegas jerseys. But Florida, I hope to see a good series out of you. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me down below who you think is going to win this Stanley Cup final. Tell me down below anything you want about the Stanley Cup final. And that's going to be all I have for you guys today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.